Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space. And as always, I hope that you enjoy. Story number 1. Run Like Hell. Written by Echoing Cascade. Persistence hunters is one of the first things you hear whenever anyone speaks of humans. To make a long story short, it means that you don't try and run away from a human. The only thing that achieves is getting you tired. But I know better. Salaz was running, stolen goods in hand. Simply trying to outrun a human is foolish, and I am no fool. He jumped over a suspicious-looking patch of leaves and looked back at the human soldier running after him. The human, without breaking stride, made the same jump, but the carefully hidden and reinforced second fall trap gave way under the massive weight. Gotcha! Now all I need is a few minutes to give the prize the time it deserves. His joy was short-lived as he watched the now quite angry human climb over the side of the trap, covered in mud. No matter, I still have plenty of traps. Salaz was flat on his back, exhausted. He could hear a rhythmic splotch clank coming closer. Ah, frack. The human soldier slowly walked towards the small bipedal lizard. She was still covered in mud, but now had the remains of a snare on her right wrist, twigs and leaves in her hair, and a metal bucket glued to her foot. No, not her boot, her foot. She put her foot bucket on the chest and pried the chocolate bar from his claws. Then, while glaring at him, unwrapped the candy and ate it in his face. Marine, mine! She then drew her sidearm, took aim at his face, and pulled the trigger. Cillian looked up at his breakfast at the scene in front of him. His colleague and close friend, sane as far as he knew, held firmly in place under the boot of one of the Marines in charge of security, as she emptied her water pistol in his face, punctuating every shot with, "Bad Zeno! Bad Zeno!" He shook his head. Don't steal food from humans, ask nicely, and more often than not they'll gladly share. It's one of the first things you hear whenever anyone speaks of humans. Salaz saw Cillian looking and gave him a silent plea for help. Cillian lifted his datapad and covered his face. Now, of course, there is always a fool or two who thinks they know better. End of story. Story number 2. Struggle, written by Lbry Father Anthracite. Alice was scared. The people in the hospital were nice, and everyone kept telling her that it was going to be okay. That freaked her out more than anything. She saw people whispering to each other around her. Nurses to doctors, doctors to other doctors. Everyone whispered to her parents. Anyone who talked to her was always loud and cheerful, though. She knew something was wrong. After having the accident, her legs had stopped working. After the surgery, they were still just laying there, useless. Alice wondered if they would ever work again. The new chair was much better than the old one. It was lighter and slightly narrower. It had large wheels in the front and small caster wheels in the back. There was a small motor if she ever got tired of pushing by hand. It was a basic black model, but Alice knew that she could get her dad to take her to the hardware store, and they would pick out some cool colors and tape, and she could make it look awesome. By the time freshman year started, it would be tricked out, and her friends would help her decorate it even more. Alice was working in one of the labs, her face stuck to an eyepiece of a microscope. She was counting dyed nerve cells on a prepped slide, one of the many tasks a student in genetics was required to do during the lab portion of their classes. She noted a very high count and made a note on the slide number, and then moved on to the next slide. Alice was working in an office of a teacher, running through the next version of the gene protocol that they were working on. After finding an anomalously high nerve count several years ago, they had started narrowing down the calls, and found something that looked like it might be a promising new technique to jumpstart nerve cell growth. Alice continued to pursue her education, and if the results were viable, this might just help her get into a master's program that she wanted. Alice sat in her chair, looking around the new lab. Her new lab. A grant based on her PhD thesis had paid for all of this, and now she was going to be able to finally prove that neurogenerative inhibitors were a controlled response in human cells that could be toggled on and off with the proper protein sequence. Alice sat looking at the results of the latest test batch, while her assistant looked on nervously over her shoulder. The isolated protein structure was deformed during the folding process exactly the way she predicted. They found the key. She looked at her assistant. "Run it again. I need to be sure." The human patient lay face down on the table. Overhead, a gantry with a motion control unit was set up with a syringe and with an IV bag containing custom folded proteins. The man on the table was a volunteer. On the other side of the glass sat Alice. She got a nod from the tech and was pressed the button on the microphone. In the patient room, her voice came out of the speaker grill. "We are going to start now, Ted. Let us know if you need us to stop for any reason." The gantry lowered into place over his spine. Ted looked into the doctor's eyes, his own slick with tears. He knelt in front of her chair and wrapped his arms around her waist. He cried into her lap for a few minutes, saying, "Thank you. Thank you so much." Over and over again, she whispered that she was happy to help. Alice goes home, rolling up a ramp her father built for her. After all these years, he still kept it in great shape. She knocked on the door. A voice calls out from inside, "Who is it?" "It's me, Alfie. Open up." The door opens, and a young man, just a few years younger than Alice, opens the door. He stands in the doorway, his gaze above her head. "What are you doing here? Is it meatloaf night?" He moves his cane from one hand to the other and opens the screen door. "Coming in, sis. I got good news. I passed my bar exam. I'm a lawyer now." "I knew you could do it." She'd stopped halfway through the door and hugged her little brother. He patted her head once or twice, then slid his hand down to her shoulder. He squeezed her closer as she hugged him. "Have good news, too," Alice said. "It's not meatloaf night?" Alfie asked. "No, we still got to eat meatloaf. Sorry." She rolled all the way into the house, and Alfie closed the door. "So, what's the good news?" It worked, Alfie. We can fix it." Alice sits in a chair in a hall in Sweden. Alfie sits beside her. The presenter calls her name. Alfie stands and pushes his sister through the hall, up the ramp to the stage. She is presented with a medal and pointed to a low mic stand just next to the podium. Alfie nods and rolls her over to it. She waits for the light applause to die down and then starts her speech. "When I was 8, my family was in a car wreck. It was pretty bad. I haven't walked a day since. In the 35 years that followed, I pursued one singular goal, to find a way to regenerate nerve tissue damage. I was stuck in that chair that day. All in all, not that bad. I could still get around on my own, and I could do most of the stuff kids normally do. But my brother lost his sight. He lost his ability to run free and roam around. I spent the rest of my life trying to bring his vision back, with the help of countless others. I finally did it. My brother can see again, and it made 35 years of struggle worth it." Jenny is sitting in a bed. She can feel the hands around her head removing the bandages. She held her breath as the last few layers were lifted off. "It's okay, Jenny. You can open your eyes," said the doc. Jenny liked the doc. She was nice. She had wheels for legs and gave Jenny a ride through the hospital sometimes. Jenny let out a slow exhale and opened her eyes. She blinked a few times. Everything was so bright. "It's okay, Jenny. Can you see me?" Jenny moved her eyes and saw something in front of her. "Doc!" She placed her hands on the woman's face and looked for the first time into the face of the woman who gave her sight. She had bushy, kinky hair with streaks running through it. Her skin was darker than Jenny's. Her skin was looser and softer than Jenny's skin because she was older. The doc was smiling. Jenny could tell because her hands told her so. Her eyes didn't make sense yet. She closed her eyes, trying to focus. "It's okay, Jenny. You don't have to push yourself. It'll take some time. But everything is okay now," said Alice. End of story. This is a special thank you to the one the only, the legendary Eric Hino, who has become the only Tier 6 patron. Just a quick shout out to the T5 peeps: Bob the Dragon, Cat Crab Lobster, Data Magnet, Dark Machine, Try Again 95, Pudic Yol, Astrea the Dreamer, Caspar Arnholtz, Cam Maxwell, Athelia, Meridian 117, and Jordan Bucksmorm. Thank you very much. And that, my friends, concludes this video. I hope that you enjoyed. There are links down below, both to support this channel and for the author of this fiction. Anyways, I hope you all have a fantastic one, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.